Hey, Bargo here. I really love a good mystery, and this one fascinates me very much, and I really do hope they find the missing Skymaster during my lifetime. I am very eager to know what happened to it. I won't deny it, I've spent countless of hours scanning the flight path and its surroundings on Google Earth, but enough about me now, let's get into the story. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. An airplane carrying 44 people vanished in the Yukon in the 1950s. After 70 years, it has still not been found. Despite decades of searching, including an initial hunt that drew in 98 planes, 3 of which crashed, and some 7,000 people, there is no trace of the C-54 Skymaster. Skymaster was a World War II era transport carrier based out of El Paso, Texas. It was a big, snub-nosed metal hot dog of a plane, with an 8-person crew and room for 50 passengers. It was almost 100 feet long, 4-engined and over 17 metric tons. This was not a tiny plane. This is what makes the disappearance of the Douglas C-54 in the 1950s so mysterious. On 26 January 1950, the Douglas C-54 Skymaster with serial number 4272469 disappeared on a route from Alaska to Montana with 44 people aboard. Everyone on board that day was fitted with a parachute. The aircraft made its last radio contact 2 hours into its 8-hour flight. Skymaster's radio operator checked in over Snag, a tiny gold rush settlement on the Yukon's White River. The air route from Anchorage to Montana was notoriously rough. There were radio checkpoints every half hour along the way, meant to keep the pilots on track and out of the mountains. That check-in was the last anyone ever heard from the Skymaster. Somewhere after Snag, it disappeared. No trace of it has ever been found. Despite one of the largest rescue efforts carried out by a joint effort between Canadian and US military forces, it is considered one of the largest groups of American military personnel to ever go missing. The aircraft was a part of the 1st Strategic Support Squadron out of Texas. In addition to its 8-man crew, it was carrying 36 passengers, including 2 civilians, a woman and their infant son. An earlier attempt to depart had been made, but due to trouble with one of its 4 engines, it was delayed several hours. The flight was from Anchorage, Alaska to Great Falls, Montana. 2 hours after its eventual departure, the pilot reported the flight was on course and had just passed over Snag in the Yukon, but there were no further messages. An hour after the plane failed to arrive in Montana, Operation Mike, named for the aircraft commander, First Lieutenant Kyle L. McMichael, was launched, a search and rescue program combining as many as 98 American and Canadian planes, in addition to 7,000 personnel, searching 350,000 square miles of the Pacific Northwest. On 30th January, a C-47 Air Force from the 57th Fighter Wing that had been participating in the search stalled and crashed in the McClintock Mountains near Whitehorse. Its crew members were injured, but there were no fatalities. The pilot then walked 13 kilometers to the Alaska Highway and flagged down a truck to call in support for his 5 to 8 crewmates. On 2nd February, it was reported that 2 planes and 2 radio stations in the Yukon area had heard unintelligible radio signals, but attempts to acquire a fix on the position were fruitless. The aircraft may not have been heard from, but it certainly was seen further along the Alaska Highway, on its way south. A trapper at Beaver Lake, 40 miles northeast of Williams Lake, in the interior of British Columbia, saw and heard a large aircraft, apparently in trouble, pass over his cabin that day. Next day, reports came in from northern Montana as well. Several witnesses reported sightings of flares and later signal fires. The most convincing information came from Newgate, right on the Canada-US border, southeast of Cranbrook. Here, a large aircraft was seen that seemed to be in trouble, disappearing and possibly crashing on Gold Mountain. On 7th February, a C-47D from Eielson Air Force Base, employed on the search by the 5010th Wing, crashed on a mountain slope south of Aishihik Lake. There were 10 crew members on board, but there were no fatalities. On 16th February, a Royal Canadian Air Force C-47 crashed near Snag. Its 4 crew members sustained only light injuries. Later, its wreckage would be temporarily mistaken for the missing C-54. The operation was indefinitely suspended on 14th February, as the search planes were needed to investigate the crash of a B-36 that had been carrying a Mark IV nuclear bomb, though this bomb did not have a radioactive core. 20th February. 3.5 weeks later, after the disappearance, the US military called off the search. All 44 passengers and crew were declared missing and presumed dead. The search had taken place in horrendous weather conditions. To be fair to the US military, Operation Mike was carried out over some of the wildest lands in the continent. If a plane comes down in the desert, it can be spotted. But in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, a 17-ton plane can play a needle in a pine haystack. Another strange thing about this disappearance is that when the plane made its last check-in 2 hours after takeoff, it was already past the ocean part of the journey, and therefore must have crashed on land somewhere, which would suggest that it should have been found by now. In 2012, the descendants of the missing servicemen started a petition to the federal government through the We the People petition system, seeking to resurrect the search for their families' remains. In 2020, Andrew Gregg was named as a director of an upcoming documentary about the search for the aircraft called Skymaster Down. 70 years later, Gregg hoped his documentary breathed new life into the search for the vanished plane. He thinks it may well have struck a mountain peak and been buried under the snow and ice. Others believe it sank into a frozen lake or crashed somewhere on the ground. Gregg is convinced that somehow, someday, the wreckage will be found. He said, quote, "The thing about the Yukon is that everything eventually turns up." End quote. The documentary was aired in Canada on January 16, 2022 on the CBC documentary channel. I myself are really looking forward to this documentary. I have talked with Andrew Gregg by email and he says, quote, "We're working on getting both American and European broadcasters to buy our film, but no luck yet." End quote. So I guess we will have to wait a while before we can see this documentary, Skymaster Down. I will leave a link below in the description to the Skymaster Down documentary website and the trailer for the documentary. And with all that said, subscribe if you liked the video, and please leave a comment if there is something you want me to cover in future videos. Have a great day, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.